still walking. The Kumano Kodo was Nora's idea, originally. That was the thing she kept coming back to later, that it had been her idea first. Floated over dinner 2 years ago. A restaurant in London neither of them had been back to since. The kind of place that existed in memory as a particular quality of light and the smell of something they had ordered and forgotten. She had read about the ancient pilgrimage routes of the Kii Peninsula and described them to Yuki with the particular enthusiasm of someone who has just discovered something and needs to share it before it cools. Moss-covered stone paths through cedar forest, mountain shrines that had stood for 1,000 years, the specific silence of a place where people had been walking toward something for longer than most countries had existed. Yuki had said, "We should go." And then, as happened with these things, the idea had drifted. Jobs changed, distances widened. The particular intimacy of their friendship, built over a decade of working in adjacent offices, of Friday evenings and airport runs, and the kind of conversation that didn't require setup, had thinned in the way that intimacy thins when geography intervenes, and neither person is bad enough to be blamed for it. They still texted. The texts had grown shorter and further apart. Nora had moved back to Edinburgh. Yuki had stayed in London, then moved to somewhere in the Midlands for reasons Nora couldn't now remember clearly. A partner, a job, something. The trip had never happened. Until Nora, at 38, after a year that she would later describe to her therapist as the year of everything changing at once and to everyone else as a bit much, decided to go alone, booked the flights, planned the route, arranged the guest houses along the Nakahechi route, the mountain path that pilgrims had walked since the 10th century, from the coastal town of Tanabe into the deep forest of the Kii Mountains toward the grand shrines of Hongu and Nachi and Hayatama. She told almost nobody. That was intentional. The point was to be somewhere no one could easily reach her, to walk until her body was too tired to sustain the particular kind of thinking she had been doing for 12 months, to be in a country where she didn't speak the language well enough to accidentally have a significant conversation. She landed in Osaka on a Tuesday in early November. It was, she told herself, just a walk. The trail began at Takijiri-oji, a small shrine at the base of the mountains where the stone path entered the cedar forest, and the world changed. Nora had read about this transition and had not quite believed in it. The idea that a single step across a threshold could alter the quality of the air and the light and the sound around you. But it was true, or near enough to true, that the difference didn't matter. The highway noise of the valley floor disappeared within 50 meters. The cedars rose on either side, their trunks straight and immense, their canopy so high that the sky became a rumor. Moss covered everything. The stones, the tree roots, the old wooden markers that indicated the route. The path itself was worn smooth by 1,000 years of feet, each stone fitted against the next with the patient precision of people who understood that this path would outlast them. The fog was in the trees from the first morning. Not thick enough to reduce visibility significantly, but present. A softening of the air, a blurring of the distances between things. It suited the place. The Kumano Kodo was a landscape that seemed to have arrived at its current state through the same process as a dream, gradually without seams. Nora walked slowly and tried not to think about anything in particular. She was moderately successful at this for the first hour. By the second hour, she was thinking about everything. She was sitting on a flat stone beside the path, eating onigiri from the convenience store she had passed through that morning, when she heard the footsteps behind her. The path had been empty for most of the morning. November was the tail end of the walking season. The summer crowds were gone. The autumn leaf watchers mostly departed. She had passed 2 older Japanese men going in the opposite direction, who had nodded with the brief courtesy of people who understood that this path was not for conversation and no one else. The footsteps slowed and stopped. "I thought that was you." Nora looked up. Yuki was standing on the path 10 meters away, a hiking pack on her back, her hair shorter than Nora remembered. wearing a waterproof jacket in the particular shade of green that Nora associated with her for reasons she couldn't have explained. She looked exactly as she had looked the last time Nora had seen her, which was, she tried to calculate, at least 2 years ago, maybe 3. Nora stood up. "What? How are you here?" Yuki smiled. "I could ask you the same thing." She came forward, and they did the slightly awkward thing of people who were once close enough to hug easily and were now recalibrating. They hugged. It felt the same as it always had. "I've been thinking about this walk for years. I finally just booked it. I didn't know you were coming." "I didn't know you were coming." "Same route?" "Nakahachi, all the way to Nachi." "Same." Yuki tilted her head. "So, walk together?" Nora considered this for approximately 1 second. "Walk together," she said. It was easy, in a way that surprised her. She had been so certain of her need for solitude, had planned for it, protected it, made it the central feature of the trip. But walking with Yuki felt like picking up a book she had set down mid-chapter and finding she remembered exactly where she was in the story. The rhythm came back immediately. The way they talked and didn't talk in roughly equal measure, the way silence between them had always been companionable rather than pressured, the way one of them would start a thought and the other would finish it or redirect it or let it sit until it was ready. They walked through cedar forest and across open ridges where the fog thinned and the mountains unfolded below them in layers of blue-gray. They passed small shrines tucked into the hillside, their torii gates weathered to a deep orange red, offerings of sake and salt left on the stone altars. They passed wooden markers carved with the names of Oji, the lesser shrines that marked the route, and the occasional stone statue of Jizo, the guardian deity of travelers, dressed in a small red bib by some pilgrim's hand. Yuki knew things about the route that Nora hadn't read. She talked about the Honji Suijaku, the idea that the Shinto gods and the Buddhist deities were different manifestations of the same things, that this landscape had been understood for centuries as a place where those manifestations were particularly close together, where the boundary between the ordinary world and something else was thin enough to feel. "How do you know all this?" Nora asked. Yuki considered. "I've been reading about it for a long time, since we talked about coming here, actually." "That was years ago." "I know." A pause. "Some things stay with you." They stopped that night at a small guest house in Chikatsuyu, a village in the valley between 2 mountain sections of the route. A family-run place, the owner communicating through careful mime and a translation app on her phone. Dinner was served at a low table: miso soup, grilled fish, rice, pickled vegetables, tofu in a light broth. Simple and precise. The owner asked, through the translation app, if they were friends. "Old friends," Nora said. "Yes." The owner nodded and said something that the app rendered as, "The road is better with a companion." Yuki looked at her bowl and said nothing. By the 3rd day, Nora noticed the first thing. They had been walking in fog all morning, thicker today, the trees appearing and disappearing, the path visible only 20 meters ahead before it vanished into white. They had stopped for tea at a small covered rest point, a wooden shelter with a bench and a kettle, and a tin of green tea left for pilgrims by some local arrangement that Nora found deeply moving without quite being able to say why. She had poured 2 cups and turned to hand one to Yuki, and Yuki had been looking away, up the path, toward the fog, with an expression that Nora couldn't name. Not quite sadness, something quieter than that. The expression of someone looking at something that is no longer there, or not yet there, or perhaps both at once. "Hey," Nora said, "tea." Yuki turned and the expression was gone, replaced by the familiar one. "Thank you." They drank the tea. The fog moved around the shelter. "Do you ever think about what happens after?" Yuki said. Nora looked at her. "After what?" "After." She gestured vaguely at the path and the forest and the mountain. "After any of it." "You mean death?" "I mean whatever comes after." She wrapped both hands around the cup. I've been thinking about it a lot lately. Not in a dark way, just genuinely curious about it. What the continuity looks like, if there is any. Whether the person who wakes up on the other side of it, if there is another side, would recognize themselves. Nora studied her. Are you all right? I'm always all right, she smiled. Drink your tea. It's getting cold. Nora drank her tea. The fog pressed in around the shelter. She told herself that Yuki had always been philosophical, had always been drawn to large questions that other people avoided. This was not strange. This was just Yuki. She put the empty cup down and looked at the path ahead, where it disappeared into white. When she looked back, Yuki's cup was empty too. She hadn't noticed her drinking it. The second thing was on the fourth day. They were descending a steep section of the route, stone steps worn to a high polish by centuries of feet, when Yuki stopped suddenly and put her hand out to steady herself against a cedar trunk. Are you okay? Nora asked. Fine, she paused. Just needed a moment. Nora waited. Around them, the forest was very still. The fog had thinned today, and the light came through the canopy in long, diffuse shafts, catching the moisture in the air so that the forest seemed to glow from within. I miss this, Yuki said. I missed walking with you. I missed it too. I didn't realize how much until now. Yuki looked at her steadily. That's how it always is, isn't it? You don't know what you're missing until you're in the middle of it again and you remember. We should have done this years ago. Yes. A pause. We should have. Something in her tone, not quite sadness, not quite regret, something more final than either. Nora almost asked about it and didn't. There would be time. They had 3 more days of walking ahead of them. She turned to continue down the steps and noticed something. The mud on the path was soft here. It had rained 2 nights ago and the ground had absorbed it slowly. Her boots had left clear impressions on the way up, the tread pattern pressed into the soft earth. She looked at Yuki's side of the path. The mud was undisturbed. She stared at it for a moment, then looked back at Yuki, who had begun to descend the steps, moving carefully, one hand trailing along the cedar trunk. Nora looked at the mud again. Perhaps the stone steps drained faster on one side. Perhaps she was misremembering where Yuki had been walking. There were explanations. She could think of several. She went down the steps. She did not look at the mud again. The wooden ima were everywhere on the route, small votive plaques left by pilgrims at the shrines along the way. Some were old, their inscriptions weathered to illegibility, the wood gone silver with age. Some were recent, bright wood, fresh ink, prayer requests and gratitudes in the names of people being prayed for. Health, safe travel, the recovery of someone sick, the memory of someone gone. Nora read them when she could, at the shrines where she stopped to rest. Her Japanese was limited. She could manage menus and transit signs and simple interactions, but she had looked up the characters for common pilgrim prayers before leaving, could recognize the broad categories even if she missed the specifics. At the small shrine above Fushiogamioji, a high point on the route where pilgrims traditionally turned and bowed in the direction of the grand shrine at Hongu, she stopped to read the ima while Yuki sat on the bench nearby. Most were unremarkable. A request for health, a prayer for a difficult pregnancy, someone's father in the hospital, someone's mother already gone, and then one that stopped her. It was recent, the wood still pale, the ink still dark, a name she recognized written in kanji and then in romaji, below it for clarity, the way some younger Japanese people wrote things now. Yamamoto Yuki, and a date. And beneath the date, in careful English, perhaps a friend or family member who had added their own words, "We walked this path for you. We carry you with us." Nora stood very still. The date on the plaque was 7 months ago. She looked up from the ima. Yuki was still sitting on the bench, looking out through the trees at the mountain view below. Her profile was exactly as Nora remembered it. The strong jaw, the way she held her shoulders, the small scar near her left ear from a bicycle accident 15 years ago that she had turned into a funny story. Nora's heart was doing something complicated in her chest. She looked back at the plaque. Yamamoto Yuki, a common enough surname. Yuki was not an unusual name. There were thousands of people in Japan named Yuki Yamamoto. She was making connections that were not there, finding patterns in coincidence the way the human mind did when it was tired or frightened or lonely. She turned away from the Ima. "Ready," she said. Her voice came out steady. Yuki stood. "Ready." They walked on. That night in the guest house at Koguchi, Nora did not sleep. She lay on the futon in the small room and listened to the sound of the river outside, the Otanashi, which ran alongside the village, fast and cold at this time of year, and tried to think clearly. The Ima, the mud, the empty cup she hadn't seen Yuki drink. The questions about what comes after, asked with a tone that was not philosophical curiosity but something else. The way Yuki sometimes paused at the shrines for longer than seemed natural, looking at the offerings with an expression that was, what? Recognition, as if she knew what she was looking at from the inside. Nora got out her phone. She had kept it mostly off since arriving. The point of the trip was to be unreachable, but the guest house had Wi-Fi and she connected to it now, sitting cross-legged on the futon in the dark, the screen very bright in the small room. She typed, Yamamoto Yuki London. The results were not immediate and not certain and not conclusive, but there was a notice, in English, on a community organization website she had never heard of, dated 7 months ago. A brief memorial, a name, a photograph that was small and low resolution but was nonetheless, she leaned closer, nonetheless recognizable. She sat with the phone in her hands for a long time. The river outside went on, fast and cold and completely indifferent. In the morning, she was not sure what she would find. She had gone back and forth in the night between certainty and its opposite, between the reading of the evidence that made the only possible sense and the reading that her mind preferred, the one in which there was an explanation. The plaque was a coincidence. The mud was a drainage issue. The cup had been drunk while she wasn't watching because she hadn't been watching. She opened the door of her room. Yuki was already up, sitting in the small common area with tea, looking out the window at the river. She turned when she heard the door. "Morning," she said. "Tea's fresh." Nora sat down, poured herself tea, looked at Yuki. Yuki looked back, and her expression was open, waiting, as if she knew that something had changed in the night and was not going to pretend otherwise. "I found something," Nora said, "at the shrine yesterday, an ima." A long pause. "I know," Yuki said. "It had your name on it." "I know." The river outside, the sound of the guest house owner moving in the kitchen, a bird somewhere, high and distant. "How long have you known?" Nora asked. Her voice was very even. She was surprised by this. Yuki looked at her tea. "I'm not sure time works the same way for me now. I know what I was and what I am. I know that's not the same thing. Why didn't you tell you?" She looked up. "When? At the beginning? Would you have kept walking with me?" Nora thought about this honestly. "I don't know. I think you would have, but I didn't want to take the chance." A pause. "I wanted to walk with you. I wanted to walk with you on this path since you described it to me in that restaurant. Since before that, actually. And then there wasn't time, and I thought." She stopped. "I thought there would be more time. There's always supposed to be more time." Nora's hands were very still around her cup. "What happened?" she asked. Yuki was quiet for a moment. Outside, the river ran fast and cold and certain. "It was quick," she said. "That's the thing people always want to know, and I think it's the thing that matters most to the ones left behind. It was quick. I didn't have time to be afraid." "Were you?" Nora stopped, started again. "Were you alone? At the end?" A small pause. Yes. The word landed in the room and sat there. Nora set down her tea, looked at her hands, looked at Yuki, who was looking at her with an expression she now recognized, had been seeing it for days without naming it. Not sadness exactly, the expression of someone who has accepted something that is not acceptable and found, in the acceptance, something that wasn't peace exactly, but was its closest available neighbor. I should have come to find you, Nora said. Before, I kept meaning to. I kept thinking we had more time. I know. That's not good enough. No. Yuki's voice was gentle. It isn't. But it's what happened. And it's all right. These things are all right eventually. They have to be. Nora looked out at the river. The morning light was coming through the window now, the particular flat gray of November in the mountains, and it lay across the low table between them and across the 2 cups of tea, and across the space where Yuki was sitting, and it behaved exactly as light should behave, falling on everything equally, making no distinctions. "Will you walk with me today?" Nora asked. "To Hongu?" Yuki looked at her for a long moment. "I'll walk with you to Nachi," she said. "All the way to the end. I told you, I've wanted to do this for years." The corner of her mouth turned up. The expression Nora had been seeing since their first year of working together, across desks and over dinner tables, and now here, in a small guest house common room in the mountains of the Key Peninsula. "Besides," she said, "you're slower than you think you are. You'll need the company." Nora laughed. The sound came out of her before she could decide whether to let it, and it was real, and it was surprised, and it was alongside everything else, alongside all the other things she would carry from this morning, exactly what it sounded like. They reached the grand shrine at Hongu that afternoon. The approach came through a forest of ancient cryptomeria, the path, stone-paved and perfectly straight, the trees on either side rising 50 meters into gray sky. It had the quality of an arrival that the whole walk had been building toward, not a destination exactly, but a change in the nature of the space. The air was different here. The silence was different. Not the silence of an empty place, but of a full one, full of something she couldn't have named in a language she knew. At the main gate, Nora stopped and looked up. Beside her, Yuki stopped too. She was quiet for a long moment, looking at the shrine with that expression again. The one Nora had learned to read now. Recognition. Familiarity with something from the inside. "Does it feel different to you?" Nora asked. "Being here. Now." Yuki considered. "It feels like a place that knows what I am," she said, "which is more than I can say for most places." They stood side by side and looked at the shrine in the gray November light. Nora thought about the restaurant in London and the conversation she had started and not finished, and the years that had passed and the not finishing of it. She thought about the ima on the hillside and the name written in careful kanji. She thought about the mud on the steps, undisturbed, and about the question of what it meant to be present in a place, what traces you left, what you didn't. She thought, "I am standing next to my dead friend in a 1,000-year-old shrine in the mountains of Japan, and I am not afraid, and I don't know what to do with that." She thought, "I should have come to find you before." She thought, "I'm here now." "Come on," Yuki said. "Nachi is still 2 days away." She moved forward, through the gate, along the stone path between the cryptomeria. Nora watched her go. Then she followed. They reached the Nachi waterfall on the morning of the 7th day. It fell 133 meters, the longest single drop in Japan, into a pool that threw up a permanent mist. They heard it long before they saw it, a sound that began as a rumor and grew into something that occupied the whole chest. The path brought them around a final bend, and there it was, framed by forest, its white column falling straight and impossibly fast from the lip of the cliff far above. The shrine of Nachi Taisha stood on the hillside beside it, its vermilion structures bright against the gray sky. The 3-storied pagoda that appeared in every photograph of the place, its tears descending toward the falls as though reaching toward them. The sound of the water filled everything, not overwhelming exactly, but total. There was no room in it for anything smaller than itself. They stood and looked for a long time. Nora had expected, without quite knowing she expected it, that something would resolve here, that the end point of the pilgrimage would be the end point of something else as well, that there would be a scene, a farewell, a clarity. She had been walking toward this for 7 days, and she had been walking toward it for longer than that, since the restaurant and the idea that had drifted, and the years that had thinned, and the night she had found the memorial and sat in the dark with the river running outside. Instead, there was just the waterfall, and the shrine, and the mist, and Yuki beside her, looking at it with the expression that Nora now understood to be the expression of someone who had made their peace with something enormous, who was not at peace exactly but was done fighting. "Is this what you imagined?" Nora asked. "Better," Yuki said. "Most things are when you finally do them." A pause. The waterfall poured itself down without interruption. "I have to go soon," Yuki said, not apologetically, just as a fact. "I know. I don't mean," she paused, "I don't mean right this second. I mean eventually. There's a difference." Okay, Yuki agreed. They stood there a while longer. The mist from the falls moved around them, damp and cold, the kind of cold that settled into your clothes gradually without you noticing until it was already in your bones. Nora thought about what to say and found she didn't have it yet. Didn't have the words for what this week had been, for what it meant to have been given it, for what she would do with it when she got home and sat in her flat in Edinburgh and tried to return to the ordinary texture of her life. She would try. That was all you ever did. You tried, and the trying was the thing. "I'm going to light incense," she said, "at the shrine. Do you want to?" She turned. The path beside her was empty. The mist moved through the space where Yuki had been standing, unhurried, indifferent. The waterfall went on. The shrine stood on its hillside in the gray morning light. Nora stood alone on the path and looked at where her friend had been. She stood there for a while, long enough for the mist to settle on her jacket and her hair, long enough for a group of Japanese tourists to arrive and disperse and arrive again with cameras, long enough for the light to shift slightly overhead, the gray brightening fractionally towards something that was almost silver. Then she walked up to the shrine. She bought incense from the small stall at the gate, lit it at the burner with the match they provided, and stood it in the sand among all the others. The smoke rose and joined all the other smoke and disappeared into the air. She stood for a moment with her eyes closed. Then she opened them and looked at the falls and listened to the sound of the water. It had been falling for longer than she had existed. It would go on falling after she was gone. There was something in this that was not comfort exactly, but was the shape of the space where comfort sometimes lived. The recognition that the world was very large and very old, and that the things that mattered in it were small and specific and brief, and mattered completely, and that brief was not the same as insignificant, had never been the same, and that the people who suggested otherwise had simply not loved anything enough yet to understand the difference. Nora picked up her pack. She had a bus to Shingu, then a train to Osaka, then a flight to Edinburgh, emails to return, a flat that needed cleaning, a therapist you saw on alternate Thursdays who would ask how the trip went, and to whom she would say, "It was good. It was harder and better than I expected. I found what I went to find and also something else." She would not say, "I walked with a dead woman for 7 days through the mountains of Japan." She would not say, "I was not alone, and I did not know it, and that was a gift." She would not say a lot of things, but she would remember the fog in the cedars and the sound of the waterfall and the expression on Yuki's face at the shrine gate. Recognition, familiarity with something from the inside. She would remember the Ima on the hillside with the careful ink, still fresh. She would remember walking together and the easy rhythm of it, the way some things came back without effort. She stepped through the gate. Behind her, the Nachi waterfall fell and fell and fell, the way it had always fallen, patient and particular and completely without ending. She walked toward the bus stop. She did not look back, but she had the feeling, faint, without logic, present, that if she had, she would have seen nothing on the path behind her. And also, somehow, the opposite.